When Dorothy misses the wizard's balloon, a forgotten gate in the Emerald City begins to close, and she has only one day to find the key. Welcome to Dorothy and the Hourglass Road, a lost tale from the land of Oz that's never been told until now. If you love magical adventures, timeless fairy tales, and stories of courage and friendship, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this one. The great balloon had risen, climbed into the blue, and then wobbled like a bubble too proud of its height. It sailed over the towers of the Emerald City with the wizard inside and Dorothy waving both hands from the ground, her feet too slow and the wind too quick. The cords had slipped from her fingers like strings in a dream. Now the square stood empty, the green flags drooping in the still air, and Toto circled her feet with a little whimper, his nose to the ground and his eyes full of questions. Dorothy did not cry. She had done all her crying the night before, tucked beneath the green quilt in her palace chamber, wondering if the wizard truly could keep his promise. But now, with the balloon vanished and the people of the Emerald City watching her with polite silence and emerald spectacles, she folded her hands and whispered, "Well, then." Beside her stood the Scarecrow, his painted face tilted skyward, mouth in a puzzled grin. "I don't suppose," he said, "that we might catch it if we built a taller ladder?" Dorothy shook her head slowly. "He's gone where ladders don't reach." The Tin Woodman gave a creaky sigh and patted her shoulder with his polished hand. "We shall think of something, dear child. Hope is a brave medal, and you wear it well." The Cowardly Lion sat down with a huff, his great tail flicking like a metronome of worry. "I wish I had roared louder," he muttered. "Maybe it would have scared the balloon back down." Just then, a short and square fellow in a buttoned green coat came puffing up the marble steps from the south gate. It was the guardian of the gates, his keys jangling on his wide belt. "Miss Dorothy," he began, his voice breathless but firm. "Word has come. The south gate is enchanted. Glinda's land lies that way, true enough, but no one may pass unless the gate is opened with the last key." "Then let's open it," Dorothy said simply. The guardian's face twisted, half grieved. "That's just the trouble. The key's been missing since the first wizard arrived. He never needed it, being a skyman. But the spell says that if the gate is not opened by sunset today, this very day, it will lock for 100 years. There was a long, leafy hush. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. 100 years? Gasped the Scarecrow. "Why, even I might be hay dust by then." Dorothy bent to scoop Toto into her arms, his heart beating fast against hers. She looked up at her friends, at their brave, worried, hopeful faces, and she straightened her shoulders. "If one road is gone," she said, "we must make another." The lion cleared his throat. "I am brave when I must be," he said, "and I think I must be now." "Do we have a direction, dear guardian?" asked the Tin Woodman, his axe glinting in the sun. The guardian pointed to a small archway beyond the palace garden. "There's an old stair behind the glasshouse vines. Some say it leads beneath the city. That's where they kept the lost things once." Dorothy nodded. "Then that's where we begin." And so, without further fuss or feathers, the four friends turned their faces to the sunlit glasshouse and the shadowed stair behind it, where the vines whispered old secrets and the air smelled faintly of hope and dust. The glasshouse stood like a dream spun from green sugar, its panes humming with light, its walls veiled in vines that rustled even when the wind stood still. Dorothy pressed her hand against the door, and it opened with a polite sigh, as if it had been waiting for someone kind enough to knock. Inside, golden sun filtered through emerald glass, dappling the tiled floor with patterns like lily pads. Vines the color of old letters curled along the beams and rafters, some flowering with pale blue bells that tinkled faintly, as though laughing to themselves. Toto wriggled in Dorothy's arms and dropped to the ground, his small nose twitching toward a corner where the greenery was thickest. There, half hidden beneath a curtain of leaves, was a low stone arch, almost forgotten, almost swallowed by time and root. "Here," said Dorothy, tugging gently at the vines. "It's the stair the guardian spoke of." The vines coiled away, not unkindly, making a soft sound like a cat stretching after sleep. One vine, thick as her wrist, dipped downward and pointed its tip toward the dark hollow beneath the arch. "Oh," breathed Dorothy. "I think they're trying to help." "They are," said the Tin Woodman, bending to examine the stair. "Vines have good memories. When treated with kindness, they remember to return it." Dorothy pulled a blue ribbon from her sash and tied it around the first iron railing post. "So we don't lose our way back," she explained. The Scarecrow clapped his gloved hands. "Smart girl. Straw may forget, but ribbons never do. Except when the wind's particularly rude," muttered the Lion, eyeing the shadows with a shiver. They descended slowly, the steps wide but worn with age. A smell of old rain and rusted locks filled the air, and the light behind them faded with each step, replaced by the faint glow of luminous moss along the walls, pale and steady, like forgotten stars. Dorothy reached out, trailing her fingers along the moss, and whispered, "Do you think anyone's come down here since the first wizard?" "Only ghosts, if they're polite enough," said the Scarecrow cheerfully. "But they never linger long in Oz. Too many cheerful songs." Halfway down, the passage turned sharply, and Dorothy paused. "Which way now?" she asked, peering into the 3 tunnels ahead, each one dark, each one still. The vines at her feet gave a soft rustle. One little tendril, pale and brave, slithered beside her boot and pointed to the center tunnel. Dorothy bent and patted the vine gently. "Thank you," she said, quivered with pride and slipped back into the wall. The Tin Woodman nodded solemnly. "A kind word oils every hinge." "And keeps straw from scattering," added the Scarecrow with a wink. The Lion gave a huff but followed. "Well, I'm glad plants like you. All I get are burrs." With Dorothy leading and her friends close behind, they stepped into the center tunnel, where the air grew cool and full of secrets, and the sound of their footfalls echoed like questions waiting for answers. The tunnel narrowed as they walked, the moss light dimming to a pale whisper that clung to the stones like forgotten breath. Here, the air smelled of pencil shavings and ticking clocks, and soon the soft click-click of gears began to echo ahead. Dorothy tightened the ribbon on her braid and whispered to Toto, "I don't like places that tick without telling time." At the end of the corridor, a small round door stood ajar, flanked by 2 great brass hinges shaped like beetle wings. Just beyond it, the tunnel opened into a chamber not much bigger than a pantry, but brighter, filled with shelves of folded papers and brass tubes. At its center stood a beetle no bigger than a teacup, polished green and wearing a miniature cap with a gold postal seal. His little mustache twitched as he turned toward them, holding a scroll under one claw. "Name and business?" the beetle barked in a very official tone, though his voice was a bit squeaky, as though it had been wound too tightly. "We're looking for the last key," said Dorothy, stepping forward politely. "We're very sorry to interrupt, Mr. Beetle Courier of Route 12 and 7/8, he declared, bowing stiffly. "No one passes through without solving a riddle. That's the rule, signed in triplicate by the Department of Mildly Magical Mazes." The Scarecrow perked up. "Oh, I do like riddles. They keep the stuffing sharp." The beetle cleared his throat with an exaggerated hum. "Here is your riddle, and mind your metaphors. What shines in Oz, yet does not glow on its own? What guides the feet, but breaks when thrown? It is painted often, praised in rhyme, but vanishes when touched by time." The group fell into thoughtful silence. The Lion scratched behind his ear. The Tin Woodman tapped his axe against his shin. Toto sneezed. Dorothy pressed a finger to her lips. Her thoughts wandered to Kansas, to the gray fields and the old wooden fence that creaked in the wind. Everything in Oz was bright, so bright it needed green glasses to tame it. But she remembered what Aunt Em used to say whenever a peddler tried to gild something plain. "Truth doesn't need polish," she murmured. The Scarecrow tilted his head. "What was that, Dorothy?" She looked up at the beetle and answered firmly, "Truth. The answer is truth." The beetle blinked his shiny eyes. "Truth." Dorothy nodded. "It shines in Oz, but it doesn't glow. You can follow it, but you can break it. It's painted to look pretty, sometimes, but it disappears if you don't protect it." There was a long tick of silence. Then the beetle clapped his claws together with a delighted snap. By the queen's quill, you're right. Oh, that's a rare thing. Most folks guess emerald or sunlight. You're the first to say truth. He buzzed up to a small lever and pulled it. The far wall groaned and slid open, revealing a passage lined with tall, mirrored panels. Proceed, said the courier, beaming. And should you find the postmaster's spectacles, tell him he left them in my inkwell again. Dorothy curtsied low. We'll be sure to tell him. The Tin Woodman bowed, the Scarecrow tipped his hat, and the Lion whispered, I wish the riddles at school had been like that. Together, they stepped through the hidden door, leaving behind the ticking chamber and the beetle's cheerful humming, their hearts a little lighter and their steps more sure, for they had remembered that even in the strangest corners of Oz, truth was still the truest compass. The passage before them shimmered like water held upright. The walls on either side made not of stone but of tall, silver mirrors that stretched up and up until they faded into shadow. Each mirror flickered faintly, not with light, but with movement, soft as dreams, sharp as memory. Dorothy stepped forward, her hand brushing against one pane. At once, the mirror rippled. And there she was, not in Oz, but in Aunt Em's kitchen in Kansas. The kettle steamed. The floor was clean. The old checked tablecloth fluttered in a summer breeze. Uncle Henry tipped his hat from the barn door. It was all there, as though she might step forward and take her place again. Toto barked, tail wagging. He saw it too. Is it real? Dorothy breathed, reaching a hand toward the glass. It was warm, oddly so. Behind her, the Scarecrow gave a soft whistle. There's a field of corn in mine. And a school. A real one, with desks and questions and chalk I don't even have to chew. The Tin Woodman stood very still. I see a room full of clocks, all ticking with hearts instead of hands. Each beat sounds like laughter. The Lion shuffled, eyes wide. Mine shows me sleeping peacefully. No nightmares, no jumps at shadows. Just rest, sweet and deep. They stood, mesmerized. The corridor grew quiet. But Dorothy, still staring at the kitchen in her mirror, began to frown. It's too clean, she said. And look, Aunt Em's apron has no wrinkles. She never wore anything that neat. She stepped back. The image flickered. It's not Kansas, she said firmly. It's only what I want Kansas to be. She turned to the others. They're not windows. They're traps. The Scarecrow blinked and took a step away from his mirror. Oh, yes. Yes, I see now. There's no mud on the cornfield. And I like the mud. The Tin Woodman sighed, pulling his gaze from the clocks. None of those hearts ever ache. That's not natural. The Lion growled low and backed away. Mine smelled of lavender. I'm allergic to lavender. Dorothy squared her shoulders. We didn't come for dreams. We came for the truth, for the key. And she looked directly into the reflection before her. I'm not ready to go home, she whispered. Not until I've done what I promised. The mirror shimmered once, then went still. Her own face stared back at her now, ordinary and honest. One by one, the others followed her lead, turning from the false comforts. The corridor sighed, as though disappointed. Then, ahead, a panel of glass slid away, revealing a new passage, dark, low, and silent. The Scarecrow tipped his hat. Well, I suppose the right way always waits for those who refuse the easy one. Dorothy smiled, and her voice was soft but steady. If home calls me, it must call all of me, and all of me keeps my promises. Toto barked in agreement, and together they stepped past the last of the mirrors, leaving the illusions behind like old stories too pretty to be true. The new corridor was narrower than before, its floor slanting ever so slightly downward, and the ceiling hung low enough that the Scarecrow had to duck lest his hat brush the beams. The walls were damp here, weeping softly in places, as though the stones themselves were remembering something sad. Dorothy walked in the lead, her hand on the wall to steady herself. Toto trotted beside her, ears twitching. The Tin Woodman's axe gave a gentle tap with each step. It feels quiet, he said. The Lion's tail flicked. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that snores with one eye open. No quiet is too quiet when you've got straw between your ears, muttered the Scarecrow cheerfully. Dorothy smiled faintly, just as the floor under her heel gave a soft click. She barely had time to gasp before the ground tilted beneath her. A groan like a sleepy yawn echoed through the corridor, and a hidden panel in the wall swung open with surprising speed. Dorothy stumbled forward and vanished. "Toto!" she cried, as the little dog yelped and tumbled after her. The wall slammed shut. "Dorothy!" shouted the Scarecrow, pounding the stone. The lion roared and reared up, but the passage remained closed. On the other side, Dorothy landed hard on her hands and knees, Toto scrambling up against her. The chamber was dim, low-roofed, and smelled faintly of old books and damp string. "Well," she murmured, brushing dirt from her palms, "that's the second trap today." She stood slowly, examining the space. The floor sloped backward and the walls were smooth, giving no handhold. A circular groove in the floor suggested it might tilt again. Toto sniffed anxiously and pawed at a crack in the far wall. I know, said Dorothy, kneeling. "We've got to get out." Her fingers touched something cold. A small brass slot, shaped like a keyhole but wider. Just beside it was a tiny hinge with rust caked in the corners. Dorothy thought hard. "I haven't much in my pockets," she thought. "A blue ribbon, a peppermint, a crayon stub, and—" she gasped, reaching into her apron. There, tucked safely where she'd left it, was the extra tin button from the woodman's pouch. He had given it to her earlier, saying, "In case you find a squeaky hinge that doesn't listen to kindness." She examined the hinge and pressed the button into the groove. Click. The panel shuddered. "Hold tight, Toto," she whispered. With a groan, the wall swung wide, and she was back in the corridor, face to face with the surprised Scarecrow. "Well, butter my boots," he exclaimed. "You found the way back." Dorothy grinned, brushing dust from her dress. Only needed a little quick thinking and a friendly button. The Tin Woodman wiped his eyes with a corner of his oilcloth. "I knew it would be useful. Nothing given in kindness is ever wasted." The lion sniffed her hair to be sure she was real, then gave a low, rumbling purr. Dorothy reached down to lift Toto, who licked her chin in approval. "I'm all right," she said, "but we'd better keep our eyes open. The walls down here have tricks in them." The Scarecrow nodded solemnly. "And likely more surprises than a jack-in-the-box on a windy hill." Together, once again, they pressed forward, Dorothy now walking with her fingers curled not just around Toto, but around the lesson that had saved her. Don't panic. Think first. Cry later. The passage narrowed once more, and the moss that had lit their way before grew thin and patchy, like a candle forgotten mid-burn. Soon, they stepped into a place where even the echoes felt uncertain. Here, the air hung still and damp, thick with the smell of old rope, rusted hinges, and something like forgotten laundry. The walls were rough, the floor uneven. Dorothy reached out, but the stones were clammy and cold under her fingers. "I think," the Scarecrow said quietly, "we've wandered past the cheerful parts." "I can't see a thing," muttered the lion, his voice echoing too loud in the hush. Dorothy fumbled into her apron pocket and pulled out the peppermint. She did not eat it, but held it close. Somehow, the tiny bit of sweetness gave her courage. Toto whimpered and limped slightly, his paw catching on a jutting stone. "Oh no," whispered Dorothy, scooping him up. "You've hurt your foot." She sat on the cold floor and cradled him gently in her arms, brushing dirt from his fur with trembling fingers. The others sat nearby in the gloom, each quiet in their own thoughts. For the first time since the balloon had risen without her, Dorothy let herself feel the heaviness creeping in. "What if we can't find the key?" she thought. "What if we never reach the south gate? What if Oz keeps me longer, not because it wants to, but because I simply can't find the way out?" She pressed her face into Toto's fur. "Uncle Henry's boots are waiting by the back door. Aunt Em's sewing basket is under the chair. The windmill creaks at dusk. They won't know I'm still trying." She squeezed her eyes shut. "I miss home," she whispered. The Tin Woodman sat beside her with a clink. "So do I," he said gently. Even if I've never quite had one. Dorothy gave a shaky laugh. You're kind to say so. The scarecrow shuffled closer. A good scarecrow never lets friends sit in the dark alone. I would light a fire, offered the lion. But I'm afraid of small spaces and smoke. Dorothy looked around. We need light, she murmured. And a way forward. Her hand touched something beside her boot. A small metal shape. She picked it up. It was a cracked lantern. The glass cloudy and chipped, but with a handle still sturdy. On its brass base, faint marks had been scratched into the metal. Chalk lines, too faded to see clearly, but lines nonetheless. Someone's been here before, she said aloud. And they left a trail. The scarecrow perked up. If there's a lantern, there must be a match. The Tin Woodman opened a hatch in his chest and pulled forth a single wooden match, wrapped in waxed paper. Dorothy struck it against the lantern's base. A small flame flickered to life, weak, but bright enough to paint shadows on the walls. In its glow, they saw the faint outline of arrows, chalk arrows drawn low near the floor. Dorothy stood slowly. We're not lost, she said. Not yet. Somebody else walked this path. We just have to follow where they pointed. The lion rose too, shaking off the gloom like dust. Then let's go before the dark remembers we're here. Dorothy placed the peppermint gently back in her pocket, cradled Toto close, and stepped forward, the lantern in her hand and something steadier in her chest. I am a little girl, she thought, but little girls walk miles when they must. The lantern's flickering light stretched ahead like a golden thread, chasing away shadows one hesitant inch at a time. The arrows drawn in chalk became clearer now. Small, neat, purposeful strokes that turned corners and curved around cracks in the wall. They were easy enough to follow, yet strangely invisible unless Dorothy's lantern brushed them with just the right light. I do believe we've found the lost highway of chalk, said the scarecrow, marveling. All it needs is a little attention and a lot of luck. But why didn't we see them before? Asked Dorothy. We passed this way not long ago. The Tin Woodman squinted. Could be the moss grew over them. Could be magic, grumbled the lion. Everything else is. Dorothy paused, holding the lantern high. It wasn't the moss, or the stones, or even the darkness. There was something greenish about everything, every reflection, every shine. She reached up slowly, tugging at the arms of her emerald spectacles, the ones given to her when she first entered the city. They had become so familiar, so much a part of Oz that she'd nearly forgotten they were there. She slid them off. The world shifted. The gloom thinned, the lantern's flame burned brighter, and the chalk arrows flared in clean white against the dull stone. Even the air seemed less heavy, as if some silent fog had lifted. Dorothy blinked. It's the glasses, she whispered. They've been coloring everything green, even the truth. The others looked to one another. The scarecrow was the first to remove his. Oh, he cried. Why? I can see the stitching in your ribbon, Dorothy. The Tin Woodman removed his next. My axe shines silver again. I'd forgotten it wasn't always green. The lion hesitated, his paw trembling. What if I don't like what I see? Dorothy stepped toward him and took his paw gently. Even if you don't, she said kindly, we'll still be with you. The lion gulped, then lifted his spectacles away. He blinked rapidly, then gave a soft sigh. The stone is gray, he said, and the shadows aren't half so cruel without the green. Dorothy turned back to the wall and held the lantern close. The arrows now blazed ahead like a breadcrumb trail. All this time, she murmured, we were looking for the key, but we couldn't even see the signs meant to help us. The scarecrow snapped his fingers. A fine reminder. Don't trust what comes between your eyes and the truth. The Tin Woodman smiled. Clear sight leads to wise steps. And the lion added quietly, bravery's no good if you're blind. Dorothy tied the green glasses into a neat bundle and tucked them into her apron. We'll keep them for remembering, she said. But we don't need them now. With their eyes clear and the arrows sharp before them, they stepped forward, no longer guessing in the dark but walking a path made visible by truth. Sometimes Dorothy thought you don't need a magic key. just a better way of seeing. The chalk arrows led them deeper into the earth, where the air grew colder and the walls closer. Soon the path stopped at a chasm. A dark gap cut clean through the corridor, as if a great stone bite had been taken from the tunnel itself. Dorothy held the lantern high, the light trembling across the drop. "It's too wide to jump," she said, frowning, "and too far down to climb." The Tin Woodman leaned out carefully, tapping the edge with the flat of his axe. "No bridge," he said, "but I see iron pegs on the far wall. Someone once meant to build something here." The lion paced, his claws clicking on stone. "I could jump it," he offered, "but only alone." Dorothy looked around. "We must find a way across together." The Scarecrow tilted his head. "If only we had something long enough to stretch, something light but strong." Dorothy's eyes lit up. "Straw." The Scarecrow blinked. "I beg your pardon? Your spare straw. The bundle you keep in your back pocket. You said it was for emergencies." The Scarecrow reached behind him. "Why, yes. Clean, dry Kansas grown. Never been used." She took it from him and glanced at the Tin Woodman. "Can we use it as a rope? You have twine in your chest, don't you?" "I do," said the Woodman, unfastening a small spool. "It's not long, but with the straw woven in." Together, they twisted and braided the straw with the twine, pulling it taut. The Tin Woodman tied one end around a sturdy pipe embedded in the wall. The other end, Dorothy looped into a soft harness. "Lion," she said, "can you leap across and anchor the rope?" The lion pawed the ground, testing the wind. "I'll try," he said bravely, "but I'm not fond of chasms. They remind me of stage fright." "You're the bravest lion I know," Dorothy said with a smile, "and you never let fear stop you." He nodded, crouched low, and with a rumbling growl launched himself into the air. His paws landed firm on the other side, claws skidding just slightly. He turned and roared triumphantly, tail lashing. "I'm across!" The Scarecrow cheered. "Our lion flies!" The Tin Woodman tossed the rope, and the lion caught it between his teeth, tying it tightly around a bent iron peg. Dorothy tugged it once, testing the strength. "It will hold," she said. One by one they crossed. The Tin Woodman went first, his metal limbs clinking with every careful step. Next came the Scarecrow, arms flapping for balance, humming a scarecrow tune to keep from looking down. Dorothy went last, holding Toto close in one arm, the other gripping the rope as she slid, stepped, and swayed her way across. At last, breathless but smiling, she stepped onto solid ground. The lion gave her a nudge. "See? Bravery comes in many paws." Dorothy laughed. "And teamwork builds the strongest bridges." She looked back at the chasm. The straw and twine rope still swayed gently in the quiet air. A golden line stretched between problem and solution. With their feet again on firm stone and their hearts beating steadier, they pressed onward, hand in paw, straw beside steel, the light of the lantern casting their shadows not behind them, but ahead. The passage narrowed once more, but only briefly, before opening into a small, domed chamber where the air shimmered with the hush of old magic. The walls were smoother here, polished to a dull sheen, and ahead of them stood a great bronze door, arched like a keyhole turned tall, with a gleaming hourglass embedded at its center. The hourglass trickled slowly, its sand a pale emerald green, and only a small mound remained in the top half. "Oh!" breathed Dorothy, stepping closer. "It's almost empty." Carved into the door were 3 sigils, glowing faintly. A brain, a heart, and a lion's head. "A test," murmured the Scarecrow, rubbing his chin. "It wants us to choose." The Tin Woodman leaned close. "Each sigil has a pressure plate beneath. I believe pressing one will open the door." "But only one?" asked Dorothy. "That's not right. We've come all this way together." The lion sniffed at the base of the door. "Smells like spellwork," he muttered. "Old, proud spellwork. The kind that likes riddles and rules." Dorothy looked from one symbol to the next. "Well," said the Scarecrow, "if it's brains the door needs, I'm the logical choice." The Tin Woodman raised his polished hand. But what good is a clever mind without a kind heart? The lion swished his tail. And what's the use of either if you're too scared to step forward? Dorothy stepped back, shaking her head. No, no, this isn't how we work. They all looked at her. She touched the hourglass gently. This door, it's like the wizard's test. It wants to divide us, to make us choose who's most worthy. She turned to her friends. But we're only strong because we aren't just one thing. We've come this far because we think, we care, and we try even when we're afraid. The Scarecrow tilted his head. So what do we do then? Dorothy smiled and stepped forward. Tin Woodman, she said, taking his hand. Put yours on the heart. Gladly, he replied, pressing his palm to the glowing sigil. Scarecrow, the brain is yours. With honor, he cried, hopping to the plate. Lion. Already there, said the lion, planting his paw over the lion's head. Dorothy walked to the center, where the hourglass ticked its last few grains, and placed her palm gently against the glass itself. I don't know what I am, she whispered, but I believe in all of us. A soft chime rang through the chamber. The sigils glowed brighter, then pulsed together, not one brighter than the other. The hourglass shimmered once, and vanished. With a groan like a deep breath, the great bronze door opened. Beyond it lay a room bathed in soft, natural light, green vines curling along its walls. And at its heart, upon a velvet cushion, sat the object they had come so far to find. The last key, glinting with quiet promise. Dorothy turned to her friends, heart pounding. We did it. The Scarecrow smiled. Together as we ought. The Tin Woodman nodded. 3 parts, 1 purpose. The lion grinned. And not a drop of sand left to spare. They stepped through the door, not as separate gifts, but as one unshakable whole. The chamber beyond the hourglass door was unlike any they had seen in the winding maze of Emerald City's underworks. It was small, round, and filled with a still, leafy light that came from no candle or lantern, but from the walls themselves. Vines crept along the domed ceiling, flowering with pale gold blossoms that whispered softly as they swayed. At the very center of the room sat a low stone pedestal, upon which rested a square of velvet green as fresh spring grass. And there, perched atop it as though it were his rightful throne, was a porcelain rooster, his feathers painted in delicate swirls of emerald and ivory, his beak tipped in gold. The rooster's glassy eyes blinked slowly, and his head turned toward them with the lazy dignity of one who has been guarding a very important secret for a very long time. Well, he said, in a voice as crisp as cracked china. So this is who ascends. Dorothy stepped forward and curtsied politely. We're looking for the last key, sir. We have to reach the south gate before sunset. The rooster tilted his head. So does every soul in a hurry. What makes you different? The Scarecrow stepped forward, arms folded in a careful square. We didn't come by accident or shortcuts. We passed riddles, reflections, and chasms, and we passed them together. The Tin Woodman bowed. We don't want to take the key, only to use it, for the good of all. The lion added with a rumble. And we're very tired. The porcelain rooster gave a long sigh. It's been years, since anyone came this far. I've kept the key hidden so the city wouldn't change. If the gate opens, the world might spill in. Things will be different. Dorothy stepped closer. But different isn't always bad. Emerald City doesn't need to be locked away. It's quiet, the rooster argued. Predictable. It's lonely, said Dorothy gently. I think you know that. The rooster blinked. His beak trembled slightly. I hear the city, he said softly. Above me. Laughter sometimes. Bells. Once, a dog barked and I wept all night, though I didn't know why. Dorothy reached out and laid a hand on the edge of the pedestal. Let us open the gate, sir. Let guests come and go. Let the wind carry new songs. The rooster was quiet a long moment. Then, with the grace of a prince, he stepped aside. Take it, he said, and promise me. Promise you'll use it to open, not to close. Dorothy lifted the last key with both hands. It was heavier than she expected, cool and beautifully carved, with a bow shaped like the sun rising over a hill. "I promise," she said. "And so do we," added the Scarecrow. "With all my heart," said the Tin Woodman. The Lion gave a solemn nod. "You have my roar on it." The Rooster clucked quietly. "Then go. The gate waits, but not for long." As they turned toward the corridor, Dorothy paused, then tiptoed to a quiet corner of the chamber where the light was softest. There, she carefully removed the beetle courier's cap from her pocket and set it beside a glowing bloom. "He'll be looking for that," she whispered. Then, with Toto nestled in her arms and the key warm against her chest, she led her friends once more into the maze, this time not in search, but in return. The tunnels behind them had seemed endless, but now they ran, lantern swinging, key glinting, breath loud in their ears. The chalk arrows had faded, and the glow of the moss was barely enough to guide their steps. But Dorothy held fast to the last key, and her feet knew the way, even when her eyes could not. Somewhere ahead, far above, the south gate waited, and the sun was slipping. "Do you think we have time?" panted the Scarecrow, his limbs flapping like laundry in a gale. "If we don't," huffed the Tin Woodman, "we'll have to knock very loudly." "I don't like being late," growled the Lion. "It makes me feel very small." Dorothy didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart was beating too fast, and the air was thick with something new. A wind. It blew from nowhere and everywhere at once. A swirling, humming gust of green wind, thick with the scent of copper and old spells. It rushed against them, pushing them back. "It's the seal," shouted the Tin Woodman. "It's closing." The wind howled louder, tugging at their clothes, flinging Dorothy's ribbon from her braid. Vines along the walls shuddered and shrank. Stones trembled beneath their feet. "We'll never reach it on foot," cried the Scarecrow. Dorothy turned sharply. The cart! They had passed it just moments before. An old handcart, tipped on its side, half covered in moss. With a shout, the Lion bounded back and flipped it upright. "Get in!" he roared. The Scarecrow and Tin Woodman leapt in first. Dorothy clambered in next, cradling Toto close. The Lion shoved from behind with a mighty heave, paws skidding on the stone. But the wind pushed harder. Dorothy's eyes darted to the bundle of spare straw still tied at the back of the cart. An idea sparked, wild, Kansas-born, and just daring enough. "Scarecrow, untie your straw." The Scarecrow blinked. "Pardon." "Quickly." He fumbled with the knots, and Dorothy grabbed a broken signpost from the wall, jamming it upright into the cart's front slot. She tied the straw in wide loops and spread it like a sail. The wind caught it instantly. The cart lurched forward, wheels screeching as it sped down the sloping corridor. The Lion gave a startled yelp and leapt in at the last second, his tail streaming behind him like a pennant of bravery. They flew through the winding halls, the wind now propelling them instead of resisting. The tunnel opened wider. The air grew warmer. And then they saw it. The south gate, a towering arch of gold-veined marble, its hinges engraved with swirling script. A wide keyhole gleamed at its center, and above it, a final grain of sunlit sand shimmered at the top of an hourglass carved into the stone. "Dorothy!" cried the Tin Woodman. She stood, swaying as the cart slowed, and leapt forward. Her boots skidded on the polished floor as she thrust the last key into the lock. Click, clang. A hum rolled through the gate like a thunder held deep underwater. The hourglass turned itself once, then froze. With a groan that sounded like the yawning of an ancient lion, the gate swung open, and a flood of golden light poured through. Beyond it, green hills rolled softly toward the south. A red path glittered like ribbon. The wind at last was quiet. They had made it, barely. The Lion collapsed in a heap, panting. "I am not pushing anything again until next Tuesday." The Scarecrow laughed breathlessly. "Let's hope Oz uses carriages in the future." Dorothy stepped through the archway and looked back. They had run, leapt, flown, and built their own wind to reach this moment. She placed her hand gently on the warm stone and whispered, "Thank you for waiting." And the gate, as if it heard her, did not close. Evening spread across the southern hills like a warm shawl, golden light slanting low through the open south gate. The red path beyond shimmered with promise, winding gently into the distance toward a horizon that could only lead to Glinda's realm. Dorothy stood just past the threshold, the last key still in her hand. She turned it once, thoughtfully, then tucked it carefully into a pocket near her heart. Behind her, the others gathered their breath and their thoughts. "Well," said the Scarecrow, smoothing a wrinkle in his shirt, "we've opened a gate no one's touched in 100 years. I dare say that counts as a productive afternoon." The Tin Woodman nodded, his polished chest rising with a quiet sigh. "And we did it without swinging a single axe." The Lion sniffed. "Except at the wind, which doesn't count, I hope." They all laughed, tired, grateful, and bright. As the last of the sun dipped behind the city's tallest spire, a soft bell chimed behind them. The gatehouse doors creaked open, and out stepped a line of cheerful citizens in green coats and golden slippers. Some carried bread wrapped in embroidered cloth. Others bore pitchers of cool water and baskets of glowing lanterns. At their front was a small girl with clever eyes and a rolled-up map in her hands, the path to Glinda's palace traced in red thread. "We watched the sky," she said, offering the map to Dorothy. "When the south gate opened, we knew you'd found the key." Dorothy took the map with both hands, her voice warm. "Thank you." A gentle cluck sounded behind her. The porcelain rooster had perched upon the outer gate's arch, feathers catching the evening light. "I've never seen the wind go backward before," he remarked. "Very inventive." Dorothy looked up and smiled. "There are many kinds of courage. Today we used all of them." As the last light faded, she reached into her apron and removed a bundle, the green spectacles she had worn for so long. She held them up once, then knelt to place them on the stone just inside the gate. "For someone else," she said softly, "but only if they choose to wear them." The Scarecrow stepped beside her. "Will we need them again?" Dorothy shook her head. "No, not anymore. I think I've learned to see clearly on my own." The Tin Woodman touched her shoulder. "You've grown taller in spirit, Dorothy. If hearts could measure such things, yours would tower over the Emerald City itself." The Lion stretched and yawned wide. "Tall or not, I hope Glinda's palace has cushions." Dorothy smiled and gathered Toto in her arms. He licked her cheek, tail wagging. "Come on," she said to her friends. "We've a journey ahead, and a good one this time." And so they stepped forward, down the red path glowing in twilight. The south gate remained open behind them, no longer a wall but a welcome. Dorothy walked at the front, the key tucked safely away, her step steady and her heart certain. The road home would come, but for now this road was hers. And she walked it not as the girl who had been left behind, but as the one who had found her way forward. Dorothy didn't just open the south gate. She unlocked a truth inside herself. The road home will always be waiting, but sometimes the journey forward is what truly changes us. If the story moved you, let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join us for the next magical storybook adventure. Until then, keep your eyes clear, your heart kind, and your courage strong.